Michelle, take it away.
Thanks, Amber Ray. So staying consumer focused when navigating brand crisis. That's what we're here to talk about. And I have had a lot of moments in my career in brand management that have truly made me sit back and say, oh my God, what is happening? Because brands aren't perfect and neither are people. And there have been more than a few times when I've looked up from a news article or my phone in an email or a trending hashtag and immediately thought, okay, now what do we do? Mistakes happen, situations happen, people talk, people react, news travels quickly, crises and issues will happen. But the way that they can affect brands and companies can be quick and long-standing if not approached correctly and carefully and from a consumer-facing lens. I work in brand management and have my entire career. And the way that I describe what I do as a brand marketer is to truly commit to understanding consumers' lives the way they are today and the way they want to live them in the future, to design products and services for their lives, and then to tell stories in which people can see themselves as the main character in every piece of content that ever leaves my hands. When dealing with a brand crisis or any sort of situation at hand, my tune doesn't change. And I want to share with you how I stay committed to consumers and ways that you can stay committed stay committed to consumers in any sort of crisis, issue, or situation, from the smallest customer service issue that may pop up to the most high profile and visible situations. Consumers are at the heart of any brand, and they're going to be at the heart of any crisis with which you're dealing. And there are three areas that we're going to focus on in this discussion. And where we're starting is what consumers have to say about what's happening. Because one of the strongest forces in business is what consumers are saying when no one is asking them. And consumers, more often than not, will be the kindle and the fuel to any crisis that is going to come across your desk. And that is why it is so critically important to be in tune with your consumers, their lives, and their lived experiences. Because if you aren't listening, if you aren't understanding, and if you're not in the places where consumers are, you're going to miss a lot of the unprompted conversation. And that's where we're starting. Unprompted conversation, number one. Listen to the unprompted voice of the consumer. Listen very carefully to what consumers are saying about what they think is happening. What is the overall tone of the conversation? What are the underlying cultural factors and implications of what's going on that is either resonating with or provoking your consumers in this situation? One of the things to be really aware of in a brand crisis is that you are no longer just managing for your consumers. There are a much broader group of people who are now involved in what's going on. So what is the overall tone of that conversation? Who are your critics? Who are your supporters? Who are the instigators of the conversation? And who's really carrying it along? It's going to be really important to understand who those people are and where they fall in your consumer group or not. And then understanding what is the main issue perceived by the consumer. Because while what really happens does matter, what happened really matters, it only matters as much as that message is carried by your consumer. What they perceive as the reality and what they perceive to have happened is really what's most important and is really the message that you're trying to manage there. And the last part to really consider and kind of dive into when you're thinking about this is, what is the major gap in the experience consumers should be having with your brand and the experience of their current reality or perceived current reality with your brand? That unprompted consumer voice is critically important because we as marketers are good at asking questions about what we want to know. But what consumers want you to know without you asking is going to be most important when it's time for you to respond. But when it comes to hearing consumers and when it comes time to respond, if I tweet negatively about a company and they're not around to hear it, does it make a sound? And the answer is yes, it absolutely does make a sound. It just means that you as a brand won't know what the sound is, won't know what the problem is until it's so deafening and so loud that you have no choice but to react in the moment and are forced to pay attention. And that is not a situation that any brand or company wants to be in. So to kind of get ahead of all of that, you need to be where the conversation is happening. And while dealing with a brand crisis, you cannot fix where you were not in the first place. So if you never had a presence in a particular channel, or if you didn't have a presence with a particular consumer group at the time, there's nothing you can do in the moment to go back and change that. But what you can do moving forward is be where the conversations are happening right now as the crisis unfolds. Where and how you respond is going to be equally as important as what you actually say when it comes time to deal with the crisis at hand. Choosing the platform and the medium that is most salient to the situation and most relevant for your consumers is going to be extremely important. For those of you who are familiar with the Gorilla Glue situation that happened last month with Tessica Brown, she glued her hair down with Gorilla Glue adhesive spray. That was a situation that entirely unfolded over social media. Instagram and Twitter were the primary places where that conversation was happening. And it wasn't just Gorilla Glue consumers who were in that conversation. It was a broader group of consumers who maybe did or didn't have experience with the brand, but were now being made painfully aware of it. Gorilla Glue official did not initially respond when this first exploded in social media. But when they did take the time to respond, they did it at a time when they knew that their brand was going to be inextricably linked to the situation that was going on, and it would benefit them better to jump into the conversation and help provide guidance, help provide the right messaging, and steer the conversation in a way that would benefit and at least not hurt their brand in the long run. And they did it in the medium and in the forum where the conversation was happening, on Twitter and on Instagram. If Gorilla Glue had decided to put out a beautiful public formal PR statement or take to CSNBC for a press release or something like that, they might as well have not said anything anyway, because that is not where the conversation was happening. Those are not where the consumers were having the conversation. So being where your consumers are having the conversation to respond is what is going to make consumers know that you're listening, that you're there, that you are with them and you understand them. Ensuring that you have a brand voice that is flexible enough for the platforms being used is going to be key. And it'll show that not only do you understand your consumers, but that you're willing to be a part of their everyday conversation. Twitter and Instagram is an example of everyday type of conversational language, and Gorilla Glue is flexible enough to have language to fit the situation that was both professional and branded and on brand, but also conversational in tone and matching that of the consumers who were dealing with the crisis. They were also specific, and I think specificity is really, really key. Gone are the days when vagueness and ambiguity are a way to smooth over a situation and brands to kind of leave a crisis unscathed. I actually think it's a way to draw more attention to a lack of commitment to both consumers and action. Being very specific about what you understand about the situation, what you don't understand about the situation, what you're going to do to remedy the situation is going to be really key, because consumers crave transparency, and that's not new. And the amount of transparency they're going to crave isn't going to change anytime soon. If anything, it'll probably increase as they demand more. So be specific, have the courageousness within your brand and in your company to be specific for the sake of yourselves, but really for the sake of your consumers who want to be able to trust you as a brand. But then finally, one thing I want us to think about when it comes to a brand crisis is that this is sort of a unique opportunity. And I think opportunity is not often the word that we associate with an issue or a crisis. But I say in this sort of a situation, you have the opportunity to take a stand and then not sit down. Brand crises are a really rare opportunity where consumers give permission for brands and companies to pivot and to do better and to be better and to better align themselves with their consumers' expectations. And that's not how we think of it. We think of it as an internal issue, as a reputational crisis, as something that can detrimentally hurt us and ruin our brand images. And while that can be true, it's also a really, really unique opportunity to authentically pivot, to show your consumers that you are here for them, that you've heard them, that you see what's gone wrong or that you see what is wrong, and that you're committed to fixing it for them on their behalf. I think one company who's done a really great job of taking taking advantage of a really uncomfortable crisis was Ulta Beauty. Last summer, when the entire country erupted in unrest due to the murder of George Floyd, there were a lot of brands and companies and individuals who posted black boxes all over social media and committed to a day of no posting in solidarity with the Black community. There was statement after statement after statement for the first couple of months of that crisis that were committed to diversity and racial equity and peace and community building in a way that felt very good in the moment, probably for both brands and companies and consumers. But I'd say there were very few brands who made visible acceleration and pivots that were felt on the consumer end of their brand pivots. Ulta Beauty is an example of somebody who did a really great job of taking what was a nationwide crisis affecting every brand and every company and use it as an opportunity to double down and refine their brand, their values, and their commitment to their consumer. They showcased more diversity in their ads. They made the commitment and carried out the commitment to bring on more Black-owned beauty brands. They highlighted and celebrated the definition of Blackness and Black beauty in Black beauty standards in their advertising and in their messaging, and even partnered with mainstream brands that are not necessarily Black-owned, but mainstream enough in the country to make a statement that we're all about celebrating and benefiting the Black community and its Blackness. That sort of commitment is something that very few companies take the opportunity to do. Ulta didn't hide behind a crisis. They didn't hide behind a general statement of solidarity. They made visible pivots and changes along the way. And their consumers are having better experiences because of it. Their consumers are shopping and showing more brand loyalty to Ulta than they had before. Allow a brand crisis to set a new stage for you if you choose to take that opportunity. We're often so quick to fix something that we don't sit back and think how this could be beneficial for us and our consumers in the long run if we take the opportunity to think and to stay consumer-centered in why we're doing anything and what the crisis really tells us about our consumers. So I think that in staying focused to that, and staying consumer focused while navigating a brand crisis can be difficult. I think you can use these 3 tips as sort of guidelines and guiding principles to help you figure out, are you making the best decisions? Are you responding in the best ways? And are you taking the opportunity to set your brand and your company up for success in the future? All in favor and all on behalf of who you've said your true consumer is. Listening to that unprompted voice, showing up where they're having the conversation, and then setting a new precedent and pivoting if and when necessary are all ways for your brand to not only come out on the other side of a crisis better than when you ended, hopefully, but it's also a way for you to stand up and show yourself as a trustworthy brand, a brand worthy of loyalty, and a brand that consumers are going to want to ride with for the rest of their interaction with your brand. So thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you get the chance to enact any of these.
Michelle, if I were in your shoes in those situations, I would definitely be thinking, Thank you for sharing those examples and the strategy you use to resolve sticky situations for global brands. So switching gears a bit, how many of you saw Inside Man with Denzel Washington? I'd be curious to know if our next speaker, hostage negotiator Scott Tillema, saw the film, because for him, the scenes where the police are on the phone negotiating with the crew in the midst of an elaborate bank heist is something he might have actually experienced. He'll be sharing his communication strategy for how high pressure situations and a few on the job stories, you have to be here to believe it. But before we bring Scott on, we're going to take a short break.